Good afternoon, all. I'll tell you up front, this one was kind of tough because all of the materials concerning it had flaws in them, serious flaws. The best ones that I read were surprisingly by Jimmy Swaggart and David Guccic. And each one had some things wrong, but every time I went back to the word itself, the things that they had wrong somehow corrected in my eyes. And thank you, Father, for that. This is the story of the prophet Ezekiel, part 10. And I'm projecting 2 more for this. Prophesy against Mount Seir. Starting with Ezekiel, the 35th chapter, the 1st verse. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir, and prophesy against it, and say to it, So says the sovereign Yahweh, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against you, and I will stretch out my hand against you, and I will make you a ruin and a waste. This was a word against the Edomites who populated Mount Seir. Ezekiel had already spoken a short previous word against Edom in Ezekiel, the 25th chapter, the 12th verse. So says the sovereign Yahweh, because Edom has dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and has greatly offended and revenged himself on them. Therefore, so says the sovereign Yahweh, I will also stretch out my hand on Edom, and will cut man and beast off from it. And I will make it a waste from Teman even to Dedan. They shall fall by the sword. And I will lay my vengeance on Edom by the hand of my people Israel. And they shall do in Edom according to my anger and according to my fury. And they shall know my vengeance, says the sovereign Yahweh. Alexander, a historian, noted a long history of conflict between the Edomites and the kings of Israel and Judah during the reign of each Israelite king. Starting with Saul. In this part about King Saul is found in 1 Samuel, the 14th chapter, the 47th verse. First Samuel, the 14th chapter, and the 47th verse. And Saul took the kingdom over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, with Moab and with the sons of Ammon, or the Ammonites, and with Edom, and with the kings of Zobah, and with the Philistines. And wherever he turned himself, he troubled them. Next, Solomon. This will be found in 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, the 14th verse. 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, the 14th verse. And it happened, Yahweh stirred up a foe to Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. These Edomites were something else, huh? Every time they turned around, they were fighting against the Israelites. He was of the king's seed in Edom. For it happened when David was in Edom, and Joab, the commander of the army, had gone up to bury the slain after he had stricken every male in Edom. For Joab remained there 6 months with all Israel, until he had cut off every male in Edom. It happened that Hadad fled, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him, to go to Egypt. All the baddies hung out together, huh? Hadad, being still a little child, and they arose out of Midian and came to Paran. And they took men with them out of Paran. And they came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave him a house and appointed food for him, and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of the Pharaoh. At least it seems as if he did. So that he gave him the sister of his own wife for wife, the sister of Tahpenes, the queen. And the sister of Tahpenes bore him Genubath, his son, whom Tahpenes weaned in Pharaoh's house. And Genubath was in Pharaoh's household among the sons of Pharaoh. And when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, even Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, so that I may go to my own land." And Pharaoh said to him, "But what have you lacked with me, that behold, you seek to go to your own land?" He didn't trust you, brother. And he answered, "Nothing. However, you shall certainly send me away." He didn't trust him. That's what it was. Continuing with Jehoshaphat. This one is too long for our purposes today. Read 2 Chronicles, the 20th chapter, the 1st through 23rd verses on your own. Second Chronicles, the 20th chapter, the 1st through 23rd verses. Next, we have Jehoram. We'll find this in 2 Kings, the 8th chapter, the 21st verse. It's getting thick, but there's something surprising coming. I'll point it out as we get to it. 2 Kings, the 8th chapter, the 21st verse. And Jehoram went over to Zaire, and all the chariots with him. And he rose by night and struck the Edomites, who were all around him, and the commanders of the chariots. And the people fled into their tents. Next, King Ahaz. And this will be found in 2 Chronicles, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse. 2 Chronicles, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse. For again, the Edomites had come and had beaten Judah and had carried away captives. The Philistines also had invaded the cities of the low country and of the south of Judah, and had taken Beth Shemesh and Ajalon and Gederoth and Shoko with its villages, and Timnah with its villages, and Gimzo and its villages, and they lived there. For Yahweh brought Judah low because of Ahaz, king of Israel, an evil king. For he loosed immorality in Judah and sinned grievously against Yahweh. The fact that Yahweh Elohim attacks the enemies of Israel and Judah and saves the land of Israel for their future placement, this alone should prove that Elohim is not through with Israel quite yet. But he is going to lay another whipping on their enemies, the Edomites. And he has a plan to bring the Israelites back into his fold as well. We will see this in stages later on, and the final stage will be the dry bones. And the truly final stage will be the kingdom of God. In verse 4, he is again speaking here of the Edomites. Ezekiel, 35th chapter, the 4th verse. Ezekiel, 35th chapter, the 4th verse. I will raise your cities, and you shall be ruined, and shall know that I am Yahweh. Because you have had a never-ending hatred and have shed the blood of the sons of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that iniquity had an end. That's the wrong time to check someone. When they finally come to their senses and show it outwardly to their God. That's what happened here. Verse 6, therefore, as I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, I will yield you up to blood, and blood shall pursue you. Since you have not hated blood, even blood shall pursue you. So I will make Mount Seir a ruin, and cut from it the one passing through, and the one returning. And I will fill the mountains, his mountains, with its dead. In your hills and your valleys and all your rivers, those slain with the sword shall fall in them. There goes your water. I will make you ruins forever, and your cities shall not be inhabited. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. Verse 10, because you have said, these two nations and these two lands shall be mine, and we shall possess it. Yet Yahweh was there. Therefore, as I live, says the sovereign Yahweh, I will act by your anger and by your envy, which you have shown out of your hatred against them. And I will make myself known among them when I have judged you. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. He kept telling them, I have heard all your blasphemies, which you have spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, desolation, they are given to us for food. So with your mouth you have boasted against me, and have multiplied your words against me. I have heard them, your words. So says the sovereign Yahweh, when the whole earth rejoices, I will make you a ruin. As you rejoiced at the inheritance of the house of Israel because of desolation, so I will do to you. You shall be a desolation. O Mount Seir and all Idumea, even all of it, they shall know that I am Yahweh. Prophesy to the mountains of Israel. Notice that the naming convention here in terms of Yahweh will change a little bit. It was Yahweh Elohim. Now it has transcended into the sovereign Elohim. A slight change, but we're on it. The world is still confused by other names. And in that confusion, stuff like this goes right by you. It was Yahweh Elohim. Now it has transcended into the sovereign Elohim, as the king himself is doing these things to prove that all of this is coming from his hand, done by him or Yeshua the Messiah. They are one in mind, one in deed, and one in direction. Continue at Ezekiel, the 36th chapter, the first verse. Also, son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel, and say, mountains of Israel, hear the word of Elohim. So says the sovereign Elohim. Notice the change there. Because the enemy has said against you, aha! Even the old places have become a possession to us. Therefore prophesy and say, so says the sovereign Elohim, because of the wasting and crushing of you from all around, that you might be a possession to the rest of the nations. And you were lifted up on the tip of the tongue and the talking of the people. And so, mountain of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Elohim. So says the sovereign Elohim, to the mountains and to the hills, to the rivers and to the valleys, to the deserted wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which become a prey and a mockery to the rest of the nations all around. So the sovereign Elohim says this, surely in the fire of my jealousy, I have spoken against the rest of the nations, against all Idumea, who have given my land to themselves for a possession with all joy of heart, with scorning of soul, to make it open land for a prey. So prophesy concerning the land of Israel. And so says the mountains, and to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys. So says the sovereign Elohim, behold, I have spoken in my jealousy. and in my fury, because you have borne the shame of the nations. Therefore, so says the sovereign Elohim, I have lifted up my hand. Surely the nations around you shall bear their shame. But you, O mountains of Israel, you shall put out your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel. For they have drawn near to come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you shall be tilled and sown. And I will multiply men on you, and all the house of Israel, all of it. I'll explain that a little bit later. And the cities shall have people, and the wastes shall be built. And I will multiply men and beasts on you, and they shall increase and be fruitful. And I will make you dwell as before. And I will do better to you than at your beginnings. And they had pretty good beginnings. And you shall know that I am Elohim. Yea, I will cause men to walk on you, even my people Israel. They shall possess you, and you shall be their inheritance. And not anymore will increase their bereavement. So says the sovereign Elohim, because they say to you, you are a devourer of men, and you have bereaved your nations, so you shall devour men no more. Nor shall you bereave your nations anymore, says the sovereign Elohim. Nor will I allow you to hear the shame of the nations anymore. Nor shall you bear the shame of the peoples anymore. Nor shall you cause your nations to fall anymore, says the sovereign Elohim. And the word of Elohim came to me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel lived in their own land, they defiled it by their own way and by their doings, even as the defilement of women's impurity. Their way was before me, so I poured out my fury on them because of the blood that they had shed on the land, and for their idols by which they defiled it. And I scattered them among the nations, and they were scattered through the land. I judged them according to their way and according to their doings. And when they entered the nations where they were sent, they even profaned my holy name by saying to them, these are the people of the Elohim, and they are gone out of his land. But I had pity for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations where they went. Therefore say to the house of Israel, so says the sovereign Elohim, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake, which you have profaned among the nations where you went. He's saying that where you went because he knew where they were at all times. This whole thing about lost nations and all of that, that's so much hooey. He knew where they were, and he went back and got them like that because he knew where they were. Verse 23, And I will sanctify my great name, not yours, which was profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. And the nations shall know that I am Elohim, says the sovereign Elohim, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. For I will take you from among the nations and gather you out of all lands, and will gather you into your own land, Jerusalem. Verse 25, and I will sprinkle clean waters on you, and you shall be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from your idols. And I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. This hasn't come yet. A lot of people think that happened in 1948, but the book says something different. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh. Your what? They're not coming into the kingdom with spirit bodies. As I've told you from other things I've read, they will come in flesh. And I will put a new spirit within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. And you shall keep my judgments and do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers. And you shall be my people, and I will be your Elohim. And I will also save you from all your defilements. And I will call for the grain, and will increase it, and will lay no famine on you. And I will multiply the fruits of the tree and the increase of the field, so that you shall never again receive the curse of famine among the nations. And you shall remember your own evil ways and your doings that were not good, and shall despise yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and for your abominations. I do not do this for your sake, says the sovereign Elohim. Be it known to you, be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. Better to be whipped at this stage rather than whipped at the great throne in the end. Here you have a chance. 33. So says the sovereign Elohim, in the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will also cause you to dwell in the cities, and the wastes shall be built, and the wasteland shall be tilled, instead of being a ruin before all passing by. And they shall say, this land that was wasted has become like the Garden of Eden. And the wasted, deserted, and ruined cities now are fortified and inhabited. And the nations that are left all around you shall know that I, Elohim, built the ruined places and plant that which was wasted. I, Elohim, have spoken it, and I will do it. So says the sovereign Elohim. Yet this I will be sought by the house of Israel to act for them. I will increase them with men like a flock, as a holy flock. Heard that somewhere? A holy nation, a nation of priests. It comes together if you really read through it slowly. As the flock of Jerusalem in her appointed feasts, so shall the waste cities be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am Elohim. We'll end today with the valley of dry bones. This will be found in Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, and starting at the first verse. Ezekiel, 37th chapter, the first verse. The hand of Yahweh was on me and brought me by the Spirit of Yahweh and made me rest in the midst of a valley, and it was full of bones. And he made me pass among them all around. And behold, very many were on the face of the valley, and lo, they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O sovereign Yahweh, you know. Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. So says the sovereign Yahweh to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. And I will lay sinews on you, and you will bring up flesh on you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a noise. And behold, a shaking. And the bones came near, a bone to its bone. And I watched, and behold, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. And he said to me, prophesy to the spirit, prophesy, Son of man, and say to the spirit, so says the sovereign Yahweh, come from the four winds, O Spirit, and breathe on these dead ones, so that they may live. Doesn't sound like something unreal to you, does it? That's sounding like he's doing something here. Verse 10, so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the Spirit came into them. Not the eternal Spirit, this the Spirit of life itself. And they lived and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army, And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried, and our hope is lost. We are cut off by ourselves. No, you're not. Therefore prophesy and say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, and will bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahweh, when I have opened your graves, O my people, and have brought you up out of your grave. Somebody at one time said, even if one came out of the grave, they didn't believe it. They wouldn't believe it. And he said at that time, you're going to be the one coming out the grave. Believe in yourself. The things that come together when you think about them the right way. He was talking about them, to them. Now, I wish I had written that scripture in here. It would have been profoundly impactful to you all. Verse 14, and I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your own land, and you shall know that I, Yahweh, have spoken and have done it, says Yahweh. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, and you, son of man, take a stick and write on it. For Judah and for his companions, the sons of Israel. At one time, they split off into two nations because they couldn't get along. And take another stick and write on it. For Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel, his companions. And join them to one another into one stick. Into one stick. And they shall become one in your hand. And when the sons of your people shall speak to you, saying, will you not declare to us what these mean to you? Say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will put them with him, with the stick of Judah, and will make them one stick. And they shall be one in whose hand? My hand. They couldn't do it for themselves. They had Yahweh do it for them. And that's the only way that it will be done. Verse 20. And the sticks on which you write shall be in your hand before their eyes. And say to them, so says the sovereign Yahweh, behold, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone, and will gather them on every side, and will bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall not still be two nations, nor shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. 23. Nor shall they be defiled with their idols. He didn't forget. He forgave. No longer will they be defiled with their idols, even with their filthy idols, nor with all of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places, in them where they sinned, and will cleanse them. And they shall be to me for a people, and I will be to them an Elohim. And David, my servant, shall be king over them. How? He's dead right now, at this time in history. I'll clear that up as we go on. And David, my servant, shall be king over them. And there shall be one shepherd to all of them. And they shall walk in my judgments and obey my laws. That's new. And do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, the land in which your fathers have lived. And they shall dwell in it, even they and their sons, and the sons of their sons forever. And my servant David shall be their ruler forever. And I will cut a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. And my tabernacle shall be with them. Yea, I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And the nations shall know that I, Yahweh, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in their midst forever. I will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. The promise of this sanctuary will be described in great detail in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48 in a few weeks. I didn't mean to do it that way, but the book said do it that way. To Ezekiel and the Babylonian exiles, no restoration could be complete without some kind of temple. The restoration of the temple is thus far more than simply a matter of repairing war damage. It will be a completely different temple, and it will rise up. That temple will be never defiled by human flesh. After it is built, it will rise up onto a cloud above the earth. It is Elohim's way of demonstrating that he is not dead, as the world says, and that Israel are still his people. In confusion about whether David or Yahshua will be their king, that is not answerable at this time, because it has not happened yet. But clues are all over the scriptures. Yeshua Messiah is the King of Kings, as stated in Revelation, the 19th chapter, the 16th verse. Revelation, the 19th chapter, the 16th verse. On his robe and on his thigh, he has written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Humanly speaking, Yeshua is from the Davidic dynasty. Even if it's not David himself there, it's still from his dynasty. But in power, in glory, in righteousness, in every other way, he is rightly called the greater David. The government will be on his shoulders. We'll find this in Isaiah, the 9th chapter, the 6th verse. Isaiah, the 9th chapter, the 6th verse. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty Elohim, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The Old and New Testaments reveal that the future king during the millennium and all eternity is Yeshua the Messiah. I'm not saying that David will not play a role somewhere in this. He will. But that role will not be the King of Kings. Continuing in Jeremiah, the 23rd chapter, the 5th verse. Jeremiah, the 23rd chapter, the 5th verse. Behold, the day is come, says Elohim, that I will raise to David a righteous branch. And the king shall reign and act wisely, and shall do judgment and justice in the earth. Isaiah, the 9th chapter, the 7th verse. Isaiah, the 9th chapter, the 7th verse. There is no end of the increase of his government, and peace on the throne of David and on his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from now on, even forever. The zeal of Elohim of hosts will do this. Isaiah, the 33rd chapter, the 22nd verse. For Elohim is our judge. Elohim is our lawgiver. Elohim is our king. He will save us. Need more? I got more. Revelation, the 17th chapter, the 14th verse. These will make war with the Lamb. Who is the Lamb? And the Lamb will overcome them. For he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. I'm still working on the words for those, and they point back to him. But Basileia and Basileum And I didn't even write any of that down, and I'll expand on that later. And it will come full circle back to Yeshua. And if you need more, 1 Timothy, the 6th chapter, the 15th verse. For he in his own time will reveal who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords. Any questions? Any at all? Dwayne.
A little bit off.
Mhm.
Track. When the valley of dry bones were made alive, people predicted to come out of their graves.
Mhm.
How about those that were evaporated in nuclear blast and were burned alive in a traffic accident or home fire?
Who made that body in the first place?
Yeah, but there's nothing left to start with.
The part he started with is with him. He will place a new body in it and replace that body, that soul that he has up there with him. It's not alive as the world thinks.
Well, like Mike Lineker explained, that the spirit was like a little computer chip, boom. It knows nothing, it's back with the Father. That's the best analogy I remember.
That's it.
When I hear
Close
the
enough.
Where it says about the noise, hearing that noise, I hear the gathering of the bones. Sinews and all, it just, ooh, it put chills on my spine. Or you imagine the loud noise of all those bones.
That was partially a symbolic thing, but it does happen in its place in the theme as to come. And the things that we had happen there with the dry bones theme, it's going to be real with those bones that are in those graves. It's the same thing.
Perchance, but not quite. Because there is a scripture about the souls that were beheaded for and crying out for vengeance from under the altar of God. They obviously have some kind of mentality still working.
You would have to give some,
I don't want to.
I've never countenanced that, and I don't have an answer right now. I'll have one in a couple of weeks. Thurman.
What Brother Dwayne just said, remember when Cain killed Abel? Yahweh said he heard his brother's blood crying out from the ground. I think there's some kind of like figurative type.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
It's not real. It's figurative somehow, but that's the only way that he could explain it to us. There is a deeper explanation, obviously, but that one will be for us to know later because now we can't handle it.
The Father
Ruby.
gives us so much intelligence to understand, but only to a certain point because these are his mysteries. And we don't know his mysteries. If we did, we wouldn't have to be reading the scriptures. But when, exactly, when Brother Dwayne was saying, what about those people who, in the atomic bomb, well, my husband had a friend, and he was told not to do it, so he didn't do it, but his friend was, this when he was a teenager, running on a moving train, and those trains that have that molten lava in there, he said he went in and disappeared. No cry, no sound, no nothing. It just sizzled and that was it. And when you said that, we questioned it, it brought to mind.
Go up in steam.
Exactly. This is what
But that spirit came up out of there somehow and went back to the Father. Yep.
I'm saying it, well, Yahweh allowed the body to go to the sanitary, get zapped by lightning, whatever. He allowed it to do this. Well, he can also allow it to do this.
Yes.
Every piece, every speck is back. What do you mean? You can't argue with that. You will stand, you will appear if you were new. I'm sorry, he allowed our bodies, he allowed the body to do this, disappear, he can also
Bring it
say,
back.
come together.
And what happens to bodies? We're not gonna.
Well, you might get the same one, I don't know, rebuilt, I don't know, but he can make it go like this too. And that missing.
And
one's
at
back.
that point, you don't know how it happens anyway. You got it back.
Be happy to be here.
Yeah.
Be glad to be here.
Darn.
Pastor, I was just gonna say, there have been some people in the Bible that Yahweh intended to exist before they were even conceived, like Jeremiah, was that King Cyrus, I
Cyrus.
believe. I think John the Baptist, so he can make a body for somebody. If that body in the this stage of life gets destroyed, he can make another body for that person to put the spirit back.
That part is easy. Ruby.
If you think about it, when women become pregnant, we don't know what's happening. We don't see it, but it's developing, it's moving, it's creating, it's growing in you, and then becomes, at a point in time, it becomes this living being. And it starts to cry and move and open eyes, and it's mystery.
It just reminds me of in Genesis, when the Father created us out of dust. In the beginning, He created us. He
Yep,
created
from
us
dirt.
From dirt. And we will never understand that at this point, because it's not for us to understand it.
Right.
And he said that my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and my ways are higher than your ways. And he created us, a living soul, out of dirt, out of dust. And thus we should go back. But as you stated, he's going to bring
Let the Spirit returns to the Father who
Yep.
gave
going
it.
to bring
Yep.
us back.
That is so awesome.
And then it took me to the scripture of in John when he said, I have much to tell you, but you can't handle
You
it.
can't handle it right now.
So he's giving us bits and pieces that our mind can understand as far as that our mind can grasp it. And he's trying to explain it to us in his terms. But the Father is awesome.
Yes, he is. Amen.
He's just awesome. Because we were
I wanna
created us a
I wanna
living
for a minute return to that baby thing. And I'm gonna declare something here that I've declared before, but all those babies that are aborted, they're gonna be in the kingdom somehow. It's not in the Bible that in that form, but if they've seen pieces there in pieces, all those pieces together declare that those babies will be in the kingdom. And one verse had people aside to raise them according to the families. And every baby that's aborted will have a family in the kingdom. And even a lot of the churches don't go along with that because they're letting their people have abortions. Develop.
I was thinking about what people were saying about everybody's coming together, that scripture we had, and they're going to be one. I don't see it. Now they preach that he's coming back when all of us are going to hold. I heard that spoken on one of the TV preachers, and I just can't grasp.
He can't either.
That all of us gonna be one. And
He just saying something.
In this one place, everybody gonna,
I think maybe they mean like-minded, maybe.
Mhm.
I don't think so, because it said that he got these people over here, and then he took the thing and made them together. I don't understand. I don't think so. I don't think so. Because there's so many people that believe, like you just said, everybody can have abortion. That's not in there. We won't be able to think alike. Not all of us. That's my concern.
He's going to have a time with all of us. We will be on that same page with him. But after all the other stuff is done, he will do that. And there's nothing in there about when, but sometime between the great white throne and that time, the only hole in the whole thing that I see is the time when we were on that sea of glass before the wrath comes down on the earth. We're up there shining for everybody on earth to see. That's the only light there at that time. Is us up there. And while we up there on that glass, there's some things that were going to be taught to us about the use of these new bodies we have. We can't fly a squadron of planes out there. That's why he does all the shooting. We're not even able to squeeze off a thought yet in the right direction because we don't have any use of these bodies yet. How to use it. Like a kid in a Ferrari. He's going to crack it up. The faster he goes, the faster he's going to crack it up. And the being that created us knows better to give us, his children, a Ferrari and not teach us how to use it yet. Thurman.
I have one other thought on it. So Edom, they're the descendants of Esau, right?
Yep.
So if you go back to Genesis chapter 27 and verse 40, after Jacob had taken away Esau's blessing, it says, this was Isaac speaking to Esau, by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother, and it shall come to pass when you become restless that he shall break his yoke from your neck. So it says that he would be serving, be serving his brother Israel, Jacob, and by his sword that he would live. I guess, always in war. So I thought that was interesting.
Yep.
That was Genesis chapter 27, verse 40. You're welcome.
Even that will be corrected in this passage in Ezekiel 38. When they come back together, all that will be disappeared. This book is far smarter than we are. Anything that it is. It's that way intentionally. And that's why he did it that way, because only someone that was really interested in it will continue to read it until they get some headway out of it, one way or the other. And the most of the world, that's too much time. I got to go to school. I got to get rich. I got to do whatever you got to do to not do this. That's what the preacher's for. And you got all kinds of instances in the Bible where the preacher went left and when he should have gone right, and all those people that are counting on him are going to go with him into wherever he goes.
But then he said he's going to get it worse because you led him that way.
Not in
The one that, the shepherd that led them, that minister, whatever, that led them and know better. And he who led my sheep astray. You're going to get yours.
I thought of part of that verse that says, let not many of us become teachers, for we shall receive a stricter judgment.
Yeah, you're show you it was the minute, because he did it, and they was listening to him. That's why you have to read yourself.
Any more? Anybody as hungry as I am?
Oh, let me see.
I second.
8:30.